Hey everyone, it's Tyler, host of the Tyler Knows Everything podcast, where the nose is crossed out because I always want to learn more. My guest today is both super interesting and highly intelligent. Besides many deployments on a nuclear submarine, he worked at the White House under not one, but two presidents, George W. Bush and Barack Obama. He was even awarded White House Person of the Year. After leaving the military and politics, he went on to become a venture capitalist, launching multiple startups. Please welcome Cody Falcon.
Tyler
knows
everything.
All right, everybody, here with Cody Falcon, which is probably the coolest two names ever.
Hey, I appreciate it.
It's like a pro athlete name. It would sound good over the loudspeaker.
Yeah.
But, I've always said if my kids were to choose to go in the military, I would have them sit down and talk to you first because you really did it the right way.
Yeah.
Everybody, of course, has to start out boot camp and go into some deployments. Yeah. But after that, you really figured out a way to, get a bachelor's degree, get a master's degree, and transition into the private sector in phenomenal fashion.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. This is a really exciting episode. You've been on the list since day one.
I appreciate it, yeah.
All the things that you've done. But let's take it back to, born and raised in Southeast Texas, small town Kuntz.
Yeah, that's right, man. So, born and raised in this area, right? I went to Kuntz Elementary through 5th grade and then went to Lumberton Middle School and graduated from Lumberton High School, the class of 2000. And
our fellow
that's right,
class
man.
of 2000 alumni.
That's
over
right.
here.
So grew up in the area and, immediately after high school enlisted straight into the Navy, right? I was 17.
So how did that work? Because you have a late birthday, I guess,
I
right?
do, right? So my birthday was just,
last
in fact,
week.
yesterday.
Okay,
yesterday
yeah.
was my birthday.
And that was the big 3-7?
It was.
Okay.
It was. We're getting old,
So
man.
when you graduated in May, you were still 17.
I was.
That late birthday.
And so graduated in mid-May. It was probably a few weeks, maybe early June. I was down at the recruiting office. It was over there. I don't know where it's at today, but back then, this was 2000. It was over by the bowling alley somewhere in Beaumont. So went over there, signed up, or tried to sign up, right? You can't sign the paperwork until you're 18.
So you had to wait all summer, basically.
No, so I went, talked to the recruiter, told him I wanted to go into the Navy, right? I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do it, wanted to get out and see the world, right, before I went into college and more school. And he said, well, you can't really sign the paperwork until you're 18, but your parents can come down here and sign with you, and you can come in at 17.
Oh, wow.
And so went home, told my parents. They weren't the happiest, right? They were pretty upset.
So what did they think you were going to do?
They had no idea, but thank goodness my dad was a Vietnam veteran, right?
Okay.
So he was in the Navy for a few years during Vietnam. So, but I mean, it's quite different, right? It's a 40 or 50 year gap, but he knew a little bit about the Navy. And so he went down with me and talked to the recruiter, right, about, hey, what are the job codes or the opportunities, what the Navy calls rates, what are the hot ones, which ones should we avoid, what are the requirements, what do you need to make on an ASVAB to be qualified for some of these jobs. And long story short, my parents signed the paperwork that summer, and I went to boot camp outside of Chicago a week or so after my 18th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so after that, you got involved in the submarine program.
I did. So I went in mid-2000 in what the time they called the AECF, Advanced Electronic Computer Field. This was like back in the dial-up, like 33.6 modem days, right? This was before...
Yeah, because class of 2000, I didn't have anything but dial-up at home.
Exactly.
And I think I just went to college dorms that had Ethernet.
Exactly.
With T1 line.
Exactly. So I went in, and that's kind of what was in right at the time. So they called it the Advanced Electronic Computer Field.
Right.
And
cyber warfare didn't really
exist. It didn't exist, right? They weren't thinking about it. Not everything was connected like it is today. And so I went in, AECF, Advanced Electronic Computer Field, enlisted, right? Did not go to college, right out of high school. Went to boot camp, and I was in what they call the surface Navy, like the regular Navy, right? Surface ships, carriers, destroyers, all of that stuff.
Right.
Went to, a year and a half of school outside of Chicago, and the way the Navy works, right, or I think all the military works like this, you get to choose your orders out of school based on your class ranking, right? So I was towards the top of the class, right at the top of the class, and so a lot of what they call intra-service recruiting happens. And by the way, I'm learning all this on the fly, right? I didn't have anyone that I knew in the Navy, didn't really have a military mentor, right? My dad had done it decades ago, but I was learning all this on the fly. So we get in, I'm working my butt off, right? I'm studying like crazy. I'm trying to be at the top of the class, and what they call an intra-service recruiter comes in, and they recruit from within the Navy to programs like SEALs, to submarine service, to these different specialty programs. And I, growing up in this area, I'd never seen a submarine, never thought about a submarine, never really heard about a submarine. I'd seen them in movies, right? The only thing that got me excited at 18, he said, well, look, the big question was, well, what's in it for me? Why would I want to go do submarines? And at the time, he said, well, look, if you can screen and make it into the submarine force, right, which is really hard. There's figures out there. It's like less than 1% that actually apply, make it into the submarine service.
Yeah.
But if you can get in, you get a couple $100 extra a month in danger pay. You get a couple $100 extra a month in submarine pay, and it's guaranteed another 1.5 years of school before you go to the fleet or before you see the ocean.
Right.
So at 18, I thought, well, gosh, on a 5 or 6 year enlistment, I've already been in 1.5 years. If I can get into the submarine program, I'll make more money, right? And I won't see the ocean for another 1.5 years. I'll be more than halfway through my enlistment without ever seeing a ship. And so, I don't know, multiple months of screening, right? Getting into the submarine service. So I get selected, ship off over to a town in Connecticut, Groton, Connecticut, outside of New London, Connecticut, where Navy submarine school is. So went over there, spent another 1.5 years in school, and found myself on a submarine in San Diego a few years later.
Yeah. And that's kind of the highlight for the Navy, San Diego, for the SEALs.
And it worked the exact same way, Tyler. So I got to Connecticut and was studying like crazy, trying to be at the top of the class. And sure enough, right, the last day of schooling, and the way that this works, say there's 20 folks in the class. They have a whiteboard, and the night before, right, the instructor puts out basically orders like, hey, I have 20 graduates of the class. They need orders to a submarine, right? And so what's called a detailer, which is like this job classifier, he sends it's up to the needs of the Navy. Wherever there's empty spots in wherever around the world on whatever submarine, you just get the first 20, right? So we come into the classroom the next morning, and he has 20 submarines with their home ports next to them. And we started at the top of the class, which is me, and you work down. And so there were, if I remember, I think there were two San Diegos, one Hawaii, a ton of Virginia, and a few in Connecticut. And so, San Diego was it for me, right? I wanted to stay fairly close to family here in Southeast Texas, and I didn't want to be flying back and forth to Hawaii. So
and
fast attack sub in San Diego it was.
And that's a great place, even if just temporarily in your life. I got to visit there and tour the USS Midway, and the weather was phenomenal. I always thought that they exaggerated California weather, but now I see why it's so expensive to live there.
It's beautiful, man. Like really low humidity, almost non-existent, and I lived there for about 5 years. My wife and I did, and it felt like between 65 and 75 degrees year round.
Exactly, for sure. And so for a civilian like me, anything small details in the military just kind of fascinate me. I'm sure they do other people too. What are some of the crazy facts about submarines? Because they have to withstand an amazing amount of pressure. They've got a nuclear reactor. They're
They do.
nuclear powered, and they're down there for like how long were you down?
Look,
at a time.
The thing with submarines, right? Or any nuclear powered vessel today, right? Your average kind of fuel life of a modern nuclear reactor, like say on a submarine, is around 30 to 35 years, right? Before you run out of gas, so to speak. And the only thing that limits you, like from being underwater, is food.
Supplies.
Right, you run out of food.
It's basically like the International Space Station, but in reverse. You're at the bottom of the ocean, and you can stay down there indefinitely until you need more supplies.
Until you run out of food. In fact, they often compare submarines to the space shuttles, right? They're almost identical because they're completely self-sustaining, right? The only thing that you can't make more of is food. Right? You make your own water, you make your own air, right? You have a 35-year fuel tank, right? And so the only thing that could go wrong, you're going to run out of food. So the way submarines work, they can be under for a couple months at a time, and they'll pull into, just for a day or so, pull into a port, Hawaii or somewhere in South Korea or Japan, and just load up a bunch of food and then head right back out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And so what do you do during some of those deployments to kind of combat boredom? Because imagine for a second, civilian life, you get off work, but you don't go home.
Yeah.
You literally just kind of go to a room next to your office, and that's your.
Yeah, man. I wish I could draw it out for you on a whiteboard, but from my bed to my desk or my workspace, and to the kitchen, or where we would eat, what we call the galley, right? That's all within about 20 feet, right? Like total.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's almost like a mobile home because it's long.
It
and
is
narrow.
but the size is, a lot of people don't realize, right? When you see pictures of a submarine, right, you're only looking at the top about 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
The other 80% is below the water line, and so these things are huge, right? I was on a fast attack, a Los Angeles class submarine, which are the smaller ones, right? These are the guys that do submarine hunting and ship hunting and all the spying stuff that you read about. These are the smaller ones, and they're still about 365, 370 feet long, right? They won't fit inside a football field, right? They're longer than a football field, and imagine 4 to 6 stories tall.
Oh, okay. So
if you ever, if you see one in the water, it looks like there's a few guys walking, and it's a very, skinny on the top. That's just what you see above the water.
Yeah.
The other 80% is under the water. It's huge.
I guess the time that you were in, the early 2000s, where we were maybe dealing a little bit with the Afghan war.
Yeah.
It was kind of good because our enemies at the time didn't really have submarines.
Right.
Al-Qaeda didn't have submarines,
exactly.
so you're kind of doing more recon and.
Yeah, and a lot of folks don't realize, right? Submarines, modern submarines have what we call a vertical launch capability. So these guys actually launch a lot of the Tomahawks that you see on the news.
Where you see it pops up out of the water,
exactly.
and then the booster kicks in.
Exactly. And so, look, a submarine strike is undetectable, right? Imagine, if you're flying jets over, right, or you have a huge carrier sitting off your coast, it's pretty obvious, right? But a submarine could pull right into Crystal Beach, right, and launch a couple hundred Tomahawks very, very fast.
Wow. Yeah.
And you would never know where it came from.
Yeah, for sure.
And so a lot of people, a lot of folks don't realize, right, when you see like these massive wars, or you see Tomahawks coming in and the number of Tomahawks launched, a lot of folks don't realize a lot of those are being launched from submarines, right off the coast.
Yeah, so I never would have thought about that.
Yeah.
So how did you go from under the ocean to the White House? And the coolest thing about the White House, before we get into it, is that you got to work for 2 different presidents and 2 different presidents of 2 different parties. So even politics aside, with the last couple years of Bush 43 and then the first couple of years of Obama, what were some of the differences, like, not politically but personality, around the White House? Because was 43 maybe the last president that didn't have a cell phone?
You're absolutely right. He was, President Obama was kind of
the
what
BlackBerry.
we call like the first kind of digital native, right?
Yeah.
He grew up with technology.
Right.
But maybe before we get into that, the first part of your question about, like, well, how did you go from submarines to the White House? And the way the military works, right, it's, I think, one of the greatest, meritocracies, right, in the world, which means you get noticed, right? You get promoted based on your achievements and what you've done, this week, this month, this year, and even this day.
Maybe versus like who in the corporate world. Because,
it's a tough world, right? It's a meritocracy, which it's really a dog-eat-dog world.
Very competitive.
Right? It's very, very competitive.
It's full of alpha males.
100%, right? And so you can imagine, right, if you're not in the military or on the civilian side, think of a group of 10 people, right? And you tell those 10 people, hey, only one of you can get promoted this year.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and by the way, there's only, I'm watching all 10 of you, and I've got to grade you every month. And at the end of the year, right, we kind of pick the winner, and one of you 10 is going to get promoted. Right. And it's a very small space with a very small division. Right. There's not a lot of opportunity to really shine. Right. So when an opportunity presents itself, guys just jump all over it. Right. And it's pretty, it's an alpha world. Right.
Yeah.
And so, another note about the military, right, and making it to the White House was a lot of this, I call it luck, but you don't get to choose the people on your team, right, which is a huge difference between the military and the private sector. And so the way that it works in the military, if I'm the chief, right, or I'm the department head, and I have 10 people in my department, if 5 leave, right, all I can do is make a request that says I need 5 people, right? And if you think back to my school story, same thing, right? The detailer looks across thousands of people in the Navy, and whoever happens to be transferring this day, you get these 5, right? And so when I was on the USS Helena, the submarine out of San Diego, I was really fortunate, right? I had a bunch of open positions, and it just so happened the guys that I got in were absolutely incredible, world-class performers, and we had a top crack division, and we went on to win a bunch of awards, right? Departmental, divisional, and individual awards, where we kind of, after a few years, we were pretty decorated guys, and
Right.
people take notice of that, right? So I was looking to transfer out of submarine service after 5 years, 4.5 years of living on board. I said, well, maybe I need to get back to school and move back closer to home. And
Yeah, because you hadn't started a bachelor's.
I
at the
had
time.
not.
Okay.
I had not. And so, long story short, the White House called, right? I had 60 days or so left on my submarine tour, and recruiters, again, those intra-service recruiters start finding you,
Yeah,
right?
and this
So
was like 2007-ish.
it was
Yeah.
late 2006, early 2007. The White House called, JSOC, Special Operations Command called. These guys were, because we were winning all these awards. Well, I was one of the guys in that department, right? And so they're like, hey, well, who's winning all this stuff? Who are these guys, right?
Yeah.
And so we got noticed. I got the call, went and interviewed. Well, they flew out to San Diego from D.C., interviewed me, and a few months later, right, I found myself at the White House.
Yeah.
And it took me a few months, right, because I had to re-enlist for that, so I had to sign on for another 5 years or so.
Right, and
Which-
still with the Navy, I guess.
Still with the Navy.
Okay.
What they call kind of special, I guess you'd call it like a special project assignment, right? You
Yeah.
don't wear a uniform, right?
You
You're in a
switch to the
suit.
suit. Yeah.
We're in a suit every day. And a lot of folks don't realize something when you look on TV, right? Some of those guys that you see in suits around the president, those aren't just police officers or Secret Service. There's a lot of military guys in
Yeah.
that circle.
Right.
In fact, a good bit of the guys that you see around the president are likely military guys.
Yeah, because some of the military that get transferred to like chief of staff, well, then they wear a suit,
Exactly.
things like that,
Exactly. So, yeah, 2007, right? I was recruited. I moved to D.C. My wife and I did. It took me a few months. I had to convince my wife into letting me do another, sign on for another year and not leave, right, and move
Yeah.
back to Southeast Texas. So, and oddly enough, I talked her into that by saying, look, this is a desk job, right? Because on a submarine, you're always gone, right? I did all these
Yeah.
6-month plus long deployments, and when you're deployed on a submarine, like, you're gone. Like,
Yeah.
there is no communication,
Right,
right?
the
There's no
comms are
calling
down.
home. There's no, you're off the grid for months.
Yeah,
and
no
so,
FaceTime.
and so we were ready to kind of settle in and start a family. And the opportunity at the White House, it was a great opportunity, but I was excited and my wife was excited because it was a desk job. So we thought, right?
Yeah, until you got there.
Yeah. So we moved. So we moved to DC, and I took the position. I was like a communications lead, and we get up there, and within a few months, right, I'm put on what they call the travel team, right, where you
Yeah.
travel with the president or in advance of the president. And so
Right.
it quickly morphed into just as busy, if not more so, than the submarine service.
And that's like when Bush says, I want to visit this city.
Yep.
Then weeks ahead of time,
Yep.
your team sets that
Yeah.
up.
So if the president wants to come have dinner at Tyler's house tonight, or let's say next month,
Yeah.
about probably 2 weeks before the dinner, you will have a bunch of guys and gals in suits swarming your house and your neighborhood and the city,
Right.
doing all of the
It-
counter surveillance and security and infrastructure work in prep. And then, you're basically managing a big project, right? These
Yeah.
guys do all of this work a week or two in advance, and then they put in like an order to DC. And so a few days before the president comes, you'll see car planes and huge 18-wheelers, right, coming in and offloading all of this equipment. They build all this infrastructure out,
Yeah.
and then the president comes and has dinner, and then he flies out, and those guys will stick behind for a few more days to tear all of that infrastructure back
Wow.
out and go to the next stop.
Yeah. So many processes
Yeah,
just to
because
travel,
you have
right?
to realize, right, wherever the president is at, he has to have the same level of infrastructure, capability, and communication that he does sitting in the Situation Room, right? And so there's a ton of IT work, right? IT, infrastructure, communications, and planning, and just general connectivity and awareness anywhere he goes worldwide. And so, yeah, that's some of the work that I did. And it was interesting, right? I got there in 2007, so 7 and 8, President Bush's last few years, which I kind of got caught in this cycle, right? I thought, man, this isn't too bad, because in years 7 and 8, a president's not really traveling that much, right? So I kind of was lulled into this lower op tempo, right?
Yeah.
Of like, hey, this isn't too bad, right? I've kind of have a half desk job, and I'm traveling a little bit. But man, when President Obama came into office, right?
Yeah.
Naive me, I didn't realize this, but new president coming into office, what's the first thing he has to do in his first few years? Meet every other world leader.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I went from a pretty slow up tempo to 320 days a year on the road.
Yeah, I think you
constantly
said like
gone.
over 50 countries.
Yeah, somewhere
sort of-
35 to 50 countries.
Probably
you know.
more than the Navy.
Yeah, man,
or
and
more than the
and it's
submarine.
scary to think about now. I have this when I left, I got this kind of replica of the president's podium. It's in my home office today, and it has the number of travel days there. And I want to say mine's 1,150 or 1,200. Well, if you do the math,
wow.
by 4 years, that's over 300 days a year
Yeah.
gone.
Goodness.
So really interesting, right? Got to see, it was pretty historic, right? Got to spend a couple years with President Bush, Republican. Got to see the rise and kind of election of President Obama, which is a complete party shift and kind of change of command.
Yeah.
And then got to spend the first 2 years right next to President Obama.
Yeah, because what's cool about that is the party lines didn't dictate your job, because with cabinet members, usually there's obviously a new cabinet
Yeah.
coming, even if it's the same party, they're choosing
Exactly.
different cabinet members, but you got to stay.
Exactly. All those military guys and even the Secret Service guys, all of those guys that are kind of around the president, they're all assigned to what we call the EOP, the Executive Office of the President.
Right.
So it
Not
does
a
not matter
person.
who's in
Yeah.
office.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just fortunate enough, right, two and a half years with President Bush and another two and a half years with President Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was there anything that comes to mind about the differences in the, you know,
Oh, yeah.
like
You
the,
know.
you know, you have, say you have a different boss at
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
you have a different culture at work,
Oh, yeah.
and you have a different vibe.
Oh,
what,
yeah.
What was it like?
This is interesting. You know, I think two very different people, obviously, two different upbringings and political affiliations. I think
And a huge age gap at the time.
It was-
Because in 08, you know, Obama was very young
yeah.
compared to previous
Oh yeah,
presidents.
oh yeah, and so
Clinton.
President Bush, like you hit that earlier, right? He was not a digital native,
So
right? I
he-
mean, he had a clean desk. He didn't have a laptop, right? He didn't
Right,
have, you know, a BlackBerry,
So
right?
I was thinking, when he needs important information, he probably had a person come
Oh,
tell
yeah,
him
yeah.
stuff, and then
Yeah.
if he absolutely had to, he would go find a phone.
Oh yeah, you're
you know,
surrounded by age, right? And there's a phone on his desk, but he would
with
definitely,
a cord.
yeah, he definitely wouldn't like crack open a MacBook, right, and check his email, right? That's
No,
just not
yeah,
what he does.
yeah.
And so, you know, President Bush, right? It was, I would say, a little easier working with President Bush just because he was an experienced kind of career politician, right?
Right.
He'd grown up in that life. He understood it. Of course, we connected, right? I spent a lot of time with him down in Crawford on his ranch, right? So
Yeah.
I was from Texas. He
Fellow Texan.
recognized the accent, right? And so we kind of, we had that. But he was also, because of his experience in politics, was extremely well organized. And the office and the full administration ran like a well-oiled machine, right?
Yeah.
There was nothing off the cuff. We knew the
Right.
schedule weeks in advance down to the minute, and it never varied, right? It's very tight, very structured. President Obama, it's almost a 180 out, right? He did not come from politics or money, right? He put himself
Right.
through school, right? And he used to tell us stories, right? You know, he was young, right? He was a new politician, right? And I was going through grad school at the time, and I remember him telling the guys, like, hey, like, it wasn't too many years ago, right? And in the last 10 years, 15 years, I was paying back all this money in student loans.
Yeah.
I was driving a 10-year-old family Suburban to the grocery store to buy milk.
Right.
I was filling it up with gas. Like, I can tell you and I can relate to Main Street America or the middle class, right?
Yeah.
I've done it all. Like, compared to President Bush, he used to joke, right? Like, he was born into that family, right?
Yeah,
So he
for sure.
never really could connect to the middle class, if you will, right? Like, there was
Right,
always
yeah.
this joke around, like, you know, does he know what a gallon of gas costs? When's the last time he personally went and bought milk, kind of thing,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
But the downside of President Obama, he was new, inexperienced, and a little naive around what it took around the process and the schedule, right? So it was very normal, right? We
Yeah.
would, you know, if
Yeah,
we were going
yeah.
to come visit your house, he would say, hey, Tyler, let's, you know, let's, on the way out of here, let's stop by Whataburger. And it was
Oh,
like, well, you can't really do that, right? I mean, we've got to clear this Whataburger out, and we've got to shut all this down, like.
Right.
And it was a lot of off the cuff stuff where we're in your, you know, when you're on staff, it's really difficult to control that, right? Obviously, you can't tell the boss, no, we're going to go to Whataburger. But, you know, there's a lot of scrambling and a lot of schedule shifts at the last minute that we weren't really prepared to do.
Yeah, because I remember seeing his election unfold. He was basically an unknown.
Oh, yeah.
And he gave that one keynote speech.
Oh, yeah.
and everybody got a hold of the charisma.
Oh yeah.
And just ran with it. And I liked him back then too.
Oh yeah.
What did you think of his charisma when you were in the room with him?
Look, man, it's he's captivating, right? He's
Yeah.
you know, one of the smartest guys I've ever been around and ever worked with. Just
Right.
book smart. I mean, with his stats, right? He's Harvard Law Review. He's top of his class. He has all these accolades. I mean, he's extremely intelligent, and he is one of the best speakers. I mean, he's captivating.
Yeah.
And people will follow that, right?
Yeah, I talked to some people in Hollywood that are kind of like, B-list, C-listers, and I said, we weren't even talking about politics. I said, have you ever met some A-listers and you get kind of starstruck? And they said, no, not at all, never. They said, except for one time. And I was like, oh, who was it? And he was like, I got to meet President Obama. And I was like, oh, wow. That's really, he said it's the most charismatic person you've probably ever met.
Oh, yeah. I mean, super charismatic, super charming, but super down to earth. I think the difference, personally working directly with these guys, President Bush would, he may walk by and kind of give me a greeting or shake hands. I mean, he's very structured, right?
Yeah.
Where President Obama would walk in and give like a fist bump, and he'd want to know about the basketball game last night.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's just very, very different, right? I'll never forget, right, in the first few years of President Obama, and it was the change for me, right, because I was coming from President Bush's staff to President Obama, and I was shocked. I don't know if you remember this, but one of the first things he did was this Main Street America tour, right, where he took a bus all around the U.S. and he did like these backyard events. We were at it was a middle school or a high school somewhere in Ohio, and it was around lunch, and he said, look, I'm really hungry. Let me just walk down. So he walked down to the cafeteria by himself. He went through the lunch line, and they made him a ham and cheese sandwich, like on a paper plate, and we walked back down the halls back to the gym where he was giving the talk, and he was just eating it like as he was walking and talking down the hallway. You would have never seen that in the Bush administration ever, right? And so President Obama is just a different kind of down-to-earth, super relatable person, but extremely intelligent. And a fun fact in those two, President Bush never had a teleprompter. President Obama never gave a speech without a teleprompter.
Right.
So it's really interesting to think about, like, well, President Bush had these gaffes, and he came across as not very intelligent because of his accent and because some of the gaffes he had on stage, where President Obama came off really well. Well, I was there when President Bush, right, I think we had one or two kind of teleprompters in the world, right, at the White House for this. When I left, right, President Obama had 20, 30, 40 teleprompters.
So when W. Bush was giving a speech, he would just say, I got it, and wing it?
No, I mean, we always had speech writers, right? But he's
not looking at a piece of paper, so,
he'd be at a podium, and he would have the paper there, the speech, and he would just
And I think that's why a lot of people kind of have that love for him, because he was always speaking from the heart.
Exactly.
And he really loved America and,
absolutely.
and really just did the best that he could.
Oh, yeah.
And everything.
It was just incredible. I mean, so much respect for both of those guys that worked with them directly for years. I mean, both incredible human beings, incredibly intelligent.
Did you
just
have
two
much,
very different people.
Yeah. Did you get much interaction with Karl Rove?
I didn't.
Okay.
We it's interesting, like in my work there, right, they're the vice president and like these other senior leaders, right, they were kind of like, I don't want to say the B team, but it was kind of like that's the detail that some of the other guys would go to, right? Like in Secret Service, right? If you screened for what they call PPD, Presidential Protective Detail, right? Like the ultimate, right, is to be on that inner circle with the president. If you almost reach it, like you get on VP detail and kind of go. So and then there's State Department, and granted, these are all great positions, really qualified guys, but we always just gave them a lot of
because the lower you go, instead of Secret Service, you get like Capitol Police.
Oh yeah,
like for congressmen, kind of.
Yeah, you'll see. So Secret Service, another interesting fact, right? Secret Service those are all Treasury agents, right? So that is DOT. That's the Department of the Treasury, right?
That's how they were started,
and they still are, right? And so they are Treasury agents number one
for counterfeiting, right?
Yeah, counterfeiting, white collar crime, money laundering, all of this stuff, right? That's their primary responsibility. And just like intra-service recruiting in the United States Secret Service, there's this little niche that they call PPD, Presidential Protective Detail, that you can like screen for and apply and get into this niche, and then you can make it to the White House.
And I think living presidents are still getting life detail, right?
They are, but it ended. I want to say it ended for Clinton. I could be wrong.
And then I think they reversed it. What maybe?
Gosh, I don't
I know.
know.
I hear it
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah.
I remember that they did end it,
Yeah.
and it was only going to be a certain period of time. And I was like, that's crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
And what's really interesting, right? Like with President Bush, I remember someone in his early days, right? His daughters were still in college, right? And there were all types of stories, right? There were Secret
because
Service
any
agents
amount
like
of kids
Oh,
in
yeah.
the family that have to be
Oh
protected.
yeah, there were
from
Secret
something.
Service agents outside their dorm rooms, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's all these stories about like how these agents kind of built a bond with the girls, right? And so it's this relationship thing. Where like, look, I'm not gonna tell your parents, right? I'm not here to babysit you.
Right.
I'm here to be in the shadows to make sure that you're not harmed. And there's stories about sneaking out and all this stuff. It's like, hey, look,
right.
I'm not going to stop that. I would just tell me if you're going to sneak out so I can follow, right? I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell on you. I'm not going to be big brother. I'm not spying on you. I'm just here to protect you. So let's just work together.
Yeah, I think when you sign up to take a bullet for somebody, you almost have to have that bond with them.
Exactly.
And so how different do you think it would be do you have any friends that are staffers with the Trump administration?
I do. I mean, a few guys are still there. That job, Tyler, is so stressful, right? You see these pictures of 43 and 44 like coming into office versus the day that they left.
The gray hair.
And it feels like they've aged. It looks like they've aged 20 years. These guys run on a minute by minute schedule, and it's literally what we call a zero fail environment, right?
And like in Congress, in the Capitol building, you'll hear stories about how walking through the hallway, like it smells like whiskey.
Oh yeah.
And stimulation
Oh,
drugs
yeah.
and everything,
Oh, yeah.
because there's and the staffers with Congress, because they're doing a lot of the work too.
Yep.
And they're staying up for long hours.
Yeah.
There's all that pressure on the floor.
Oh yeah, and you keep in mind, like the president, that's not a job to kick back in, right? I mean,
No.
I've seen the schedules firsthand. I used to work on these schedules, and they're literally, I'm not stretching here, they're to the minute, right? And so all the movements are timed, right? So if you're going to move from this meeting to your next meeting, there'll be a 3-minute window that we've walked, and there's a transition time built in, right, with no bathroom break. It's to the minute, all the way until 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night, to the minute. And you got to think about how stressful that schedule is. You may be having a call with another president or another world leader, and there's implications if you're a minute late or 2 minutes late. Are you snubbing the country? Are you, and so you have to be on time and keep to a minute schedule. So it's ridiculously stressful and really high up tempo.
Yeah, I'm truly amazed by Trump's stamina, because
I don't know how he does it, man.
No, at his age.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I'm sure something to do with WAMU, right? The White House White House Medical Unit. So we always travel with doctors, right? And so, we would, they can help you out, right? With like, oh well, look, I'm flying 17 hours and I've got to give a speech tomorrow, right? Well, hey, let's try to go to sleep on Air Force One on the flight over.
Oh, okay.
Here's an Ambien, right?
Wow,
As an example, right? Like, and so the White House Medical Unit is always there to try to help corral some of this.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So while that was going on, you found spare time, I guess, to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree.
Yeah, and luck would have it, right? Look, and I'm a strong believer in, of course, making your own luck, right? Everyone talks about luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and completely bought into that, right? And I can talk about how that's played out for me, but so when I get to DC, information assurance, that whole electronic warfare field in the military, the cyber domain was really taking off, right? And so a lot of the guys that were in this old school electronic warfare community, they just naturally kind of transitioned over into the cyber warfare community. Right. And so once I got to DC, NSA was spinning up a program, and of course, my hat was thrown in the ring, and I was attached to the White House, so pretty much straight in to University of Maryland. So went to Maryland, finished an undergrad in computer science.
Was it a lot of physical classes?
It was both. It was a hybrid, but looking back on it, I joke now. I had the ultimate excuse, right? Because I was traveling so much, and I had a letter from the chief of staff for assignment extensions, right?
So how many people miss a class, and you have a letter from the White House?
Exactly. So it was like, look, I would look. My undergrad work was pretty straightforward, right? Because I had, I was traveling all the time. I was on the road hundreds of days a year.
And that was kind of early online classes. They really didn't have.
Yeah, that's right. And so I would send, I would give them a heads up. I knew my schedule most of the time in advance. Send over a letter from on a White House letterhead. Hey, Falcon is going to be out for 2 weeks. I'm not going to be able to get that paper in,
Yeah.
right? And the
Right.
professor would reply right away, no problem, get it in when you can get it in.
That's
of
phenomenal.
course. And so finished the undergrad, right, in computer science and
Okay.
kind of development. And it was an NSA program sponsored by NSA, but it was all in cybersecurity.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's the National Security Administration.
It
where
is.
All
It is, yeah,
the
the
James
National
Bond
Security
of
Agency.
the USA.
Exactly. And they're right there outside of D.C., right?
Yeah.
And cyber warfare was really taking off. So they were sponsoring a lot of these military guys to go get degrees in
Yeah.
information assurance.
Were you in, I guess, the same year or range of years as Edward Snowden? you
I
think?
was at the
Yeah.
tail end, right?
That's another one too that he just got noticed because of
Yep.
his intelligence. Through everything he did, they put him through tests and things.
And look, but coming from that world, I can absolutely see how that happens, right? I'm a submarine sailor,
Yeah,
right? Which
he was
submarine
super young.
sailors are a different breed, right? If you
Yeah.
talk to Navy people, submarine sailors are like kind of the weirdos, right? They're like
Right.
out there, and because most of them are extremely intelligent, but that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily correlate to like social skills, right?
Yeah.
Some of these guys are almost savant-like, right? You would
Right.
have, a brilliant nuclear physicist,
Mhm.
but maybe he can't tie his shoes,
Yeah.
right? Or he gets nervous talking to people, right?
Right.
And so Snowden and a few of these other guys, right, when cyber warfare and the
Yeah.
everything that was going on, in the U.S. at the time, we were looking for talent.
Because he was
right?
a little bit socially awkward too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of these guys were like that, right? If you ever walk the halls of the CIA and the NSA, it's not uncommon to see a guy in flip-flops with a ponytail all the way down his back
Yeah.
and a Hawaiian shirt.
And the military needs that.
Exactly.
You need the Navy SEALs
Yep.
that can kick a door down and hit a guy from 100,
Exactly.
from a mile away.
Exactly.
And then you also need the demolition experts. And
Yeah.
that's what makes America great.
Exactly.
One of the greatest fighting
Yeah.
forces is
Yeah.
they recognize the mental talent as well as the physical talent. I think.
Exactly.
So-
And it's not, the military isn't all about kind of physical brawn, right, and
Mhm.
strength and endurance. Today, especially with
There's
where
something for
technology
everybody.
is headed,
yeah.
and look, technology is in such high demand, right? If you're qualified and you've got the skill set, a lot of the shortcomings may be overlooked, right?
Mhm.
Where some people would say, well, that guy or that gal's kind of socially awkward, or maybe they have, whatever. But
Right.
hey, they're one of the best in the nation at doing this.
Yeah.
We'll overlook all of that.
Sure.
And so it
And so-
wasn't a surprise when Snowden happened, right? You hear about all this stuff, but guess what? The guy may have been one of the best hackers, if you will, in North America.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to overlook that he wasn't educated and didn't go to college and didn't do all this other stuff. But hey, he's one of the best that we have that does this job.
Right.
Let's go get him.
Yeah. So for masters, you kind of switched to the business
I
side,
did.
guess.
And so
Were you
military.
were you kind of plotting your exit? when
No, that's a whole story in itself, Tyler.
Yeah.
And so the way the military works, and even a lot of corporate jobs, right? Once you get to senior level, think like director level, most of these jobs, even at big companies in the private sector, they
Mhm.
require a master's degree, right?
Sure,
And when it's just a checkbox, right?
Right.
Do you have a bachelor's degree? Do you have a master's degree? Okay, let's talk.
Yeah.
And most of the senior executives, they will have an MBA in finance, or they'll have a technical degree to balance out a business degree. And so that's kind of the mindset in the military, and even a lot of employee-sponsored programs, like the Fortune 500 companies, when they send their executives to college, they'll follow the same program to where it's like, oh, well, you have a technical undergrad, right? You're a computer science major, you're a programmer. You need to go get a master's in business to broaden your horizon, because at some point we'd like you to manage a P&L, right? We'd like you to manage the finances of a business unit. You can't be a programmer. You can, but if you're going to get on this path, we recommend that you balance out your technical degree with a
Yeah.
business degree. And if you have a business undergrad, we'd like you to go get some technical training.
That's interesting because so many people get a master's in the same thing that they got their bachelor's in,
Yeah.
and I can see how that would be.
And look,
advantageous.
to each his own. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that, right? At my company, we have a lot of PhDs, right, that are, advanced mathematics, statistics, physicists, and they're just so specialized, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Those guys
Right.
are absolutely incredible at their job and extremely valuable, right? And so that, technical to MBA path isn't for everyone. It's just a lot of military guys you'll see do that.
Yeah, and so when you got out, what was, I guess, and I won't even know, you'll have to explain
Yeah.
it, but like what was your rank at the time? Or
So
your-
I was right at Navy Chief. So it's interesting. Earlier you asked about how the transition worked, which was a little unique for me, right? My wife and I, we started thinking like we were in this 9-month window, and I was on the road all the time, and we'd had our first child at the time,
Right.
and so he was 2 or 3 years old, right? And I was going 300 plus days a year. So,
Right.
and my wife and I are both from this area, and so all of our infrastructure, our aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, all of our help was here in Southeast Texas, and we were kind of on an island. And my wife was more so on an island because I was gone. She was essentially a single parent, right, with no help.
Right.
And so, after a few years of doing that, it was like, look, this is a dream job, right? But gosh, like, let's move back and, we'll build a house, and then you can fly back and forth every week. So I think for me, I reached that. I think a lot of people reach this career decision. It's like, career or family, right?
Yeah,
Which
for
one are you
sure.
going to do? And I reached it a little bit younger than most, I believe. And so it's like, you know what? I'm going to step away from the dream job in D.C. and move back down to Southeast Texas and figure it out, right? Because I want to be there. I want to be the father. I want to coach my son's baseball team. I want to be around.
Right.
And so it was a really interesting transition, right? Because so my timeline, right? So I'm at the White House. In August, I won like a Person of the Year award,
Okay.
right, at the White House. Huge deal. It's a career maker for guys and gals that are staying in the military.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was thinking before this that
Yeah.
I get a lot of people on here that they think I'm involved in a lot of different things in the community and programs,
Yeah.
and they think I have an impressive resume,
Yeah.
and all that's about to be crushed.
No.
At the end of the
No, and so it was really, it's kind of a scary story, right? And it kind of gives you some insight in the way the military thinks, right? And so in August, right, I was the Person of the Year, right? In late September, October, I walked in and resigned.
Oh wow.
And it was really tough, right? So you go in and you resign, and they weren't very happy, right? Because you
Oh,
can
yeah.
imagine, right? If so, the military
I
and
bet
then a
your
lot of big
anxiety
companies.
level was just
Well, not
so
just
high.
me. I mean, I had it made up, but the pressure, right, from the military, and they're looking for ROI, right, return on investment, right?
Yeah.
If I give this person
Yeah,
Person of the Year,
They made
right,
you.
at the White House, this person's military career is made.
Yeah.
And so I just gave it to this person, and then he's going to resign. Why in the world did I waste that, or why did he accept that and not make someone else's career if he knew he was going to leave anyway?
Oh. Yeah.
And so when I knew this whole award thing was coming down the pike, and my wife and I talked about it, and I thought, well, gosh, like, I see that side of the argument, but look, I've worked my butt off, right, and I'm qualified for this, and I'm not just going to give it up, right? So went in, accepted it, and then resigned, and some pretty tough conversations, right, with senior military leadership around, like, what is this? One of the quotes was like, this is a total failure of leadership, not just on yourself, but on us, right? And what they mean by that, right? So there's 700 and plus people in this agency, and you're at the top, right? So you're leaving, you accept this award, and you leave. What message does that send to the other 700?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And how did we miss this? And really tough conversations, and then it escalates all the way up. And what really, is stuck in my head, there was a really senior military leader in the room at the time, and I'm sitting in front of this panel, and he literally says, like, look, Falcon, I have 2 or 3 or 4 children of my own, right? They're all in their 20s. 2 are married. They've all finished master's degrees, really well off. And I'm on my 35th year in the military. Are you saying that I did it wrong?
Oh my goodness.
And it was just an awkward silence, right?
Yeah.
And I said, just looked at him, and all I could say was, look, to each his own, right? I totally respect that. I'm not saying you did it wrong. I'm making the purposeful decision here to leave a rewarding military career to go spend time with my family, right? And there's trade-offs on both sides of that coin, but this is what I'm going to do. And they basically closed the books and said, very well, right?
Goodness.
And so I was pulled off of the travel team. So I stopped traveling, right? And so my last few months at the White House were pretty rough. I was kind of on the outside,
Right.
right?
Because how
until I
much
left.
notice do you give, I guess?
Yeah. And so this was probably, like I said, September, October time frame when I had these hard conversations and kind of let them know. And then I had stacked up a ton of vacation. I'd thought it through a little bit, right? So I'd stacked up like 90 days of vacation.
Oh, wow.
And so like my last day in the military was some mid-April 2011. I left in January, right? And had 90 days of basically paid vacation. And I used that 90 days to job search and figure out what in the world I was going to do post-military.
Yeah. So what's your first job out of the military?
Yeah. So I moved back down to Houston. And you know, we wanted, I did some preliminary searches, right? We're from this area, so we wanted to be as close as we can, but in a metropolis, like a major city like Houston, where the job market is just crazy for technologists.
The level of job that you need for tech is going to be in Houston.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So we moved as close as we could. We moved back down to Houston. And I'd started kind of the search, right, while I was still in the military in those last few months with executive recruiting firms. And the typical path for someone like me was to go into management consulting, right? So military guy, you know, great background, undergrad, MBA. Most of those guys go into a recruiting firm like Accenture, Deloitte, BCG, McKinsey. So that was what was in my head. So was interviewing with a few companies and quickly realized that, you know, I didn't really want to be a number, right, at a huge company, right? I was in an interview and the guy said, well, look, you know, Falcon, this department has 1,150 people in it, and about 60% of those are outsourced all over the world. And we need you to kind of run this department. And it's like, God, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun, right? Coming from the military, small team, is really fast moving, really agile. And as fate would have it, the very next day I'm interviewing with this kind of startup entrepreneurial guy, and he says, you know, I've got an idea and I'm thinking about starting a business, and it's just me and you, right? Or maybe me and a few other guys, right? Like let's this group of 10 people, let's just go crush this. And contrasting it to the conversation that I had 24 hours prior, I said, man, that feels like it's right up my alley, right? I work best in small teams, right, and just building things. And
so did he need you as an employee, or did he want you as a part owner?
Both, right? So they had spent a lot of time. They spent years in this lab, this kind of R&D lab, if you will. Just think all PhDs, right? And they're building these computer algorithms basically to watch surveillance cameras,
right?
And really AI futuristic stuff, right? And they had a bunch of patents around it. The technology is incredible, and so the idea was like, okay, well, how do we turn this now into a business
and monetize it?
Exactly. And so I came in to do that, and so joined, and then it's a crazy ride. 5 years later, right? This company made a few exits, acquisitions, and sell-offs, and and I think raised over $100 million.
I think I wrote down they raised in 5 years $100 million and were awarded over 175 patents.
So pure R&D, right? So 176-ish patents at that company.
And so at this point, you're basically a venture capitalist.
Yeah, man. Well, I was kind of I'm a technology guy at heart, right? So I was kind of in the civilian world, I guess, like a product manager and like someone that can build software and solve a problem using technology, productize it, commercialize it, and then take it to market. Right. And then all of the infrastructure from sales to operations, all of that stuff in between.
It's kind of a triple threat because you've got the technical background, and then you've got the finance background, and then you can also talk to people.
And so that's exactly. So we started the business, and I said, well, look, and it's very similar to the company I'm at now, right? Which we'll talk about. But you go in, it's a startup, right? You wear 15 different hats, right? It's kind of like sitting in this room. There's just a few of us, and we've got to figure it out, right? And so you go in with an idea, right? And then you figure out, okay, well, we've got to fund this thing, right? So the way to seek funding is get some prototypes and land some early customers to show the value or kind of the product market fit, or that this is a real problem that we can solve and people are willing to pay us money for, right? And so you do a lot of sales engineering, put together some prototypes, and you get some early customers and early adopters talking about it. So do that, and you go raise money, right? And then you move into sales, and you start trying to sell the vision. You start landing a few customers. Then you move into, oh gosh, now I've got to figure out how in the world I'm supposed to deliver this. So you move into like project management. You've got to put together like a delivery arm. And then once that's in place, you think, well, gosh, I really have to go build product, right? We actually, this thing has to be rock solid. And so then you quickly move into like engineering and development of that. And that's kind of the path that I've taken in 4 companies now.
Yeah, it's basically like what you see on Shark Tank.
Exactly.
In a way.
Exactly. So that company, raised, over 100 million, right? We grew that company probably, I don't know, 60, 75 people.
And when people say raised, they're raising capital by investors, correct?
Investors, right? So you have to have some seed funding, right, to pay your initial employees.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So when they say raise 100 million, they're not selling widgets.
That's right.
Raising 100 million. They're people are saying, I believe in this company.
That's right.
And
I believe in the team. I believe in the vision. I believe in the opportunity. I'm going to give $5 million to Tyler to help him take this idea off, and then if and when it takes off, he's going to pay me back a multiple of my $5 million.
Right, depending on the negotiation.
Exactly.
Kind of like on Shark Tank, they'll want a percentage of the company.
Exactly right.
Or sometimes Mr. Wonderful, he wants a certain interest rate on his loan.
Treat it more like a loan, right?
Yeah, and then maybe a royalty on the product.
Exactly. And so that's the way this works, right? So we did over $100 million in that company, a bunch of patents, right? Lots of customers, and it's acquired a couple times and sold out, and eventually just dissolved, right?
So these companies, me kind of why patents are so important when you have a company that's on the ground floor of something.
So I'll tell you, this is a pretty nuanced. We could probably, how much time we have? We could probably spend 2 hours just on an IP or an intellectual property discussion. Patents, in my opinion, right, are not what they used to be like 2008 and prior, right? So back in these days, there was a lot of valuation put on patents, and the rough estimate was every patent you had should be around $1 million upon an exit, right?
Oh, wow.
And so when this thing was started, right, there was this rush, and we were cranking out patents like crazy, right? We were closing in on 200 patents, right? Well, 2008 and 9, that kind of went away, right? So patents are really devalued today. Okay. And one of the leaders is your boy, Elon Musk, right?
That's right.
He is an anti-patent, and Google and other Netflix and other leaders have followed that path. That like, look, the world doesn't get better. Technology doesn't innovate as fast if people are trying to lock down their secrets, right? So you discover something, you put it out there, you open source it where everyone can pile on and contribute, and you get to the end game much faster.
Yeah, Elon Musk challenges someone to be better.
Exactly.
Like, you have this electric car, home battery.
Exactly.
Aren't you worried another company is going to do it better? And he's like, go for it.
Exactly.
Let me dare you to
exactly.
do it. Yeah.
And so an interesting game, right? So we did all that work and all this IP, right? This intellectual property and all these patents, and trying to, not just protect our intellectual property, but also monetize it, because you're always looking at an exit as a founder, right? And if you're building a company, you should have an idea of the end game, right?
Yeah. Are you looking for a bigger corporation to come in and scoop you up?
Exactly.
It's not a bad thing.
Right.
You're not sitting around wondering, I don't want to get scooped up. You want that. So
exactly.
That you can, it's kind of like flipping houses.
Exactly. Exactly. And so like the patent game, right? We put all this money in there, and then that valuation starts to fall off, and it's like, well, patents today, they're not really worth that much, right? And they're not that hard to get, and they're expensive to get. So that kind of, we lost a lot of valuation on that. So today's companies, like my current company, very Tesla-like, right? That's kind of the new trend. We don't patent anything, right? We publish our work. We encourage people to pile on and contribute and tell us if it's bad or add on to it, right? And so everything is out there, and IP, the kind of historical IP patent game has really lost a lot of gusto in the last, say, 10 years.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And speaking of Tesla and Elon Musk, it's also opposite of military chain of command, which is you report to this person and you don't go above them. And he has a policy to where anybody at any level can jump to any supervisor they need to, as long as it's benefiting the customer and the company. Like if you have a question and you need it answered immediately, you don't have to wait for your boss that's on a vacation day. You just go up as high as you need
That's exactly right.
And get it done quickly.
That's exactly right. But I would warn you, right? And like that's a pretty
it's a bold move.
That's a pretty slippery slope, right? And I can share stories about some current companies on my day job where I spend the bulk of my time today. So is at a company called Arundo, and Arundo is one of the hottest startups.
Yeah, it's
in Houston.
An analytical company.
It's a data science, AI, machine learning, analytics company, and we are applying all this technology to oil and gas. But we just won one of the top. I think it's the top. We're in the top 10 of the hottest IoT startups in the world.
Oh, wow.
And so incredible growth, right? So we started this company, and we went from 10 people to today we have over 100 people in 18 months. And so have really lived that kind of rapid growth in this culture thing that you're talking about, right? Where it's like, we grew really fast. How do we maintain that startup vibe? How do we maintain, the flattest organizational structure that we can where everyone's accessible, but also build up kind of a leadership team within the company? That's really, really hard to do. And, like Tesla, that's if it's completely flat like that, that causes a lot of problems, right? There's implications that people don't think about, right? There's a lot of backstabbing and infighting and political maneuvering where...
And they're publicly traded.
Exactly.
And there's such a fascinating culture over there because they're on the cutting edge, they're innovative, they're 100% American made. Never had a bailout, but they don't perform well quarterly right now because sometimes he just wants to lower the prices to push the product out, and then but you generally have people that love that product and love Elon Musk. He's a billionaire with a B.
Oh, yeah.
And when he was sleeping on the floor of the factory floor trying to get the Model 3 out, at 2 a.m., he had people that crowdfunded for a couch. He's a billionaire. He doesn't need people. But how many people would source their money together for a billionaire to get him a couch?
But hey, Elon and a lot of these guys out there in the Valley, man, these guys are animals.
The Valley's crazy.
And so if you look at what's really interesting, right? If you're ever curious, you can go. There's a website. It's called Glassdoor, right? You can go on Glassdoor. You can look companies up, and you have to take them with a grain of salt because a lot of the reviews in there are people that have left bitter or been fired or whatever. So it's kind of this anonymous. It's like the Yelp for companies of employee reviews. Yeah. But Tesla is pretty well known to have a pretty rough work-life balance, high stress, and a pretty rough culture,
because
right? And it's not clear that like that flat org structure plays into it, but there's a lot of misery there because Elon, right?
He's a workaholic,
are at another level, right? There is no work-life balance. You're either all in or you're out, right? And so the constant pressure and the constant like, why are you leaving? You've only been here 14 hours. I expect you to pull all-nighters a couple times a week. I think that doesn't work out for everyone.
Zuckerberg was like that too, because he would code for hours and hours. He used to call it wired in. He would put headphones on and code and expect everybody to do the same thing. And so
that's something that, at Arundo, my company, right, we're very cognizant of. Like I'm admittedly a workaholic. I'm very aware of it, right? And I tell my guys and my gals, like, hey, I'm not the example, right? Just because I'm here all night, all the time, doesn't mean it's required, and that's not what the company expects. Right. And
I guess your newest venture was you took that artificial intelligence and applied it to a specific niche of the swimming pool industry.
Yeah, and so it's a fun one we're working on right now where, they say that necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So swimming pool owner, right? Me and a couple buddies, right, that work at Arundo and had worked together in the past, we're cloud architects, we're data scientists, we really understand kind of technology and how it can solve problems very fast, and into AI and ML where you're able to use data to make predictions, right, and kind of predict, what things are going to happen when. Right. And so we've been doing that for years, so we're pretty good at problem solving and building things in that area. So as swimming pool owners, it's a funny story. Most people, right, if you have a swimming pool in your backyard, right, you either pay a pool service provider, right? The pool boy comes over once a week and cleans out your pool and dumps chemicals in it and keeps you in balance so your pool's ready to swim. Right. Well, that's pretty expensive to do that. The other option is DIYers, right? People that treat their own pools, that go out there and they take their own measurements and they'll drive it down to the pool store and get chemicals and dump it in, and they try to maintain it themselves. And so me and a few others, right, we were looking at this problem, and look, I'm the lazy technologist. Look, I want everything on an app, and I want everything to be smart. Right?
Automated.
I'm really busy. I really don't have time to be doing whatever it may be.
Yeah,
right?
Automation and schedules are huge right now.
And so, look, we looked at this problem, and it's like, there has to be something, right, where I can pull it up on my phone, and it tells me my water level, my chemicals, all this readings, and it'll not only tell me what it is, but it'll recommend what I need to do and maybe even order what I need. And so we start Googling and trying to figure out. There's nothing out there, and so we went, and it's taken about a year or so, but we built it. So we built the hardware device that goes into the pool that continuously samples all of this data from your pool and streams it up to the cloud and pushes it down to a mobile app, and it's all wired in.
Wow.
Right? And we patented the hardware device, right? So kind of a counter argument. So it had never been done, and we knew that a lot of people would rush to it. So it's because it was totally blue ocean, right? There was nothing out there. So we put a patent on it before we even announced it. And so we launched earlier this year, and doing well. Super excited about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Really cool. Well, as as we're starting to wrap things up, I got to ask you, because you're in the military and it's current events, what do you think about the movement to storm Area 51?
Man, I think it started out as a meme, and as people have glommed onto this thing. I think that is a lethal mistake if someone wants to go do that.
So here's an interesting fact. As of today, the event, it's a Facebook event, and you RSVP, you click going. There's 3.5 million that have said they're going or interested. Well, here's some statistics. So China's military has about 2 million personnel. The U.S. military has 1.3 million personnel. So they've amassed a Facebook group that exceeds the Chinese and U.S. military put together. Yeah. And of course, I think we all know they're not going to do that. Yeah. But all of those hotels, because it's several hours away from Vegas. That's the closest airport, and it's just a little bed and breakfast and diners. Yeah. They're all full. They're all booked. So people are going. It's just going to end up being a party. Yeah. It'll basically be Burning Man.
Yeah. It'll be a big party. Like there's no way that there's no way that they would. I would hope would actually try to storm. I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering. But look, this isn't like Davy Crockett Alamo, like hand to hand. Like this is like helicopters and jets with huge armaments. Right? Like it's not a level playing field.
Yeah, and I think they all realize that, because they joke about that. Yeah. In that I follow that group because it's funny. But yeah, there's jokes. Oh, they can't stop us all, and then there's videos of tracer rounds, and they're like, actually we can.
No, I think it'll be one heck of a party though, Tyler. If all those people actually show up, it'll just be a big street festival.
The funniest thing I've seen is enlisted men saying, I got to go to another one of these meetings about, because they are somewhat,
they're preparing for it.
Yeah. I mean, because probably maybe they'll extend some of the borders. Yeah. And what people don't realize too is you really can't see it at all, because the square footage that the U.S. military occupies in that desert area is massive. Oh, yeah. You would have to walk around for hours just to even try to get there. And the perimeter, and they have a lot of private security out there too. Oh, yeah. That the famous white trucks that'll come get you. So.
Yeah, I've heard about it and read about it.
But some of those businesses out there are gearing up, because this is a big payday for them. They're never gonna make this amount of money ever again.
Oh yeah, this is like the one-time event, man. This is like they go all in, make their killing, and then close up shop when it's done. Right? They're probably buying into this thing and probably fueling a lot of the interest.
Yeah, T-shirts and things like that. And so, what are some of the books and podcasts and influencers that you keep handy?
Man.
Probably with the traveling, you got to read a lot of books.
Yeah. So look, I love your podcast. I think just a few weeks ago I listened. I was on a flight I fly a lot. I was on a flight to Oslo, and I listened to like 2 or 3 in a row, just binging it. It's really cool. So of course your podcast, books. The last couple months, a few interesting ones, right? I recently finished Sapiens, right? That's a good one. Factfulness is a really good one. Netflix, former HR lead Patty McCord just put one out on culture, how Netflix built that up. Incredible.
And I think you've got a lot of the military leader ones too. You've got Jocko and Leif Babin. David Goggins. You read that one? Yeah.
I fly a lot. I spend a lot of time in my truck, so I also listen to a lot of audiobooks. Goggins specifically, if you haven't read it, I would highly encourage the audiobook over the book, just because it's almost like a podcast interview. It's a really different style book.
I really enjoyed that audiobook, because after every chapter he gives the challenges and he gives some insight on what was really going on. And at first when he had the author read it, I was kind of upset. I wanted him to read it, but then I heard why he wanted to. He would have that guy read to him
Yeah.
to proofread, and he said, "Dude, you've got an amazing voice. I think they would rather listen to you
For sure.
and then listen to me maybe a little bit." And
Mhm.
so I really enjoyed that.
Now that guy Goggins, that guy is an animal, and he
Yeah.
has an incredible story.
Yeah,
right?
his is more about callousing the mind.
Yeah.
And anytime I draw up on that book for some things. When
Yeah.
when you're tired in the morning and you're
Yeah.
just doing something you don't want to do, I think, man, look at what this guy did.
Yeah.
And
That's
so-
one of the take. I mean, Goggins talks about it. I mean, I talk a lot about it. It's
Mhm.
nothing is ever given, and nothing is ever easy,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of folks, like I do a lot of talking, like with kids and young adults, and it's like, look, you can't expect something to be given to you.
Right.
When you see people out with like nice cars or nice houses, most of the time they've worked their butt off to
Yeah,
get there, right? That's
right.
not given to them, and it shouldn't be expected, and it requires a lot of hard work,
Mhm.
right, to get there. A lot of grinding, a lot of late nights,
Yeah.
a lot of nights and weekends, right? There's no, well, I'm gonna hang it up at 2 and play Xbox, right? Like you've got to buy into it and really get it in.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about just the other day that he says is don't let people take up space in your head.
Mhm.
And that's where if somebody upsets you and it's just like it
Yeah.
quote ruins your day,
Yeah.
and it's been hours and you're at home and it's time to interact with family
Yeah.
and you're still thinking about that, I kind of stop myself and I think, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that person doesn't even know
Yeah.
that I'm thinking about this,
Yeah.
and I'm allowing them to take up space in my head and affect my mood. I'm
Exactly.
in control of my mood.
Exactly.
So you really just got to take that out and take control of your mind.
Yeah, take control, and he also talks. What's he calling, like stealing souls, right?
Yeah,
he tries to
that
like
was cool.
always one up, right, and just
Right.
he tries to do what you're describing.
That story
right?
was incredible
Yeah.
of how in Buds, everybody says Wednesday's the toughest day.
Yeah.
And he said, why? Because people say that?
Yeah.
Because that's just what they say year after year
Yeah.
after year. And so he had his team amped up to carry the boat, but do chants and then throw the boat up in the air.
Showing
and
the instructors.
taunt the instructors
yeah.
and say, well, they went through the same thing I'm going through and they were tired.
Yeah.
Why aren't these guys tired?
Yeah.
And he knew that those instructors were going home and worrying about
Exactly what you just described, right?
Yes.
It's in their head.
that.
Yeah.
He took up space in their head,
Yeah.
and he took their soul. He knows that they're going home to their wife, and their wife is
And
happy to
thinking
see
about
them,
it.
and they're like they're bummed
Yeah.
out, and
Yeah.
it's hilarious.
Yeah, that guy, he's an animal, right? I just, endurance athlete, Navy SEAL. I think he's a Ranger or a Green Beret. Just
And then,
incredible story.
just for fun, he went to like Yellowstone to be a fireman,
Yeah.
where they dig and
Yeah.
put the fire out by dirt.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
fun.
that guy, highly recommend it. Goggins' book, highly decorated Navy SEAL.
And then another thing
audiobook.
that I heard from you back in the day, this is probably when you were, getting your degree and, and looking for jobs. This is a long time ago, and I always remember it. And for some reason, I had never heard this up until that point.
Yeah.
And I always thinking about it in everything that I do. You were talking about jobs, and you were like, in casually, you said, yeah, you never want to make a lateral move. You know,
Right.
you always want to.
Yeah.
Climb
So
that ladder.
lateral moves can be good, right? But you need to think them through. And I always tell everyone to never stop learning and try to be what I describe as eminently employable, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like getting in other people's heads, right? Like
Right.
you want to be so confident in your skill set and the capability that you would bring to another company that you can leave at any time, right?
Right.
And so the risk to anyone's jobs are always there, especially in Texas, right? Texas is an at-will employment state, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
people lose jobs all the time, completely unexpectedly.
Sure.
You do not want to be caught unprepared, right? And so never get comfortable. Goggins talks a lot about this, right? Like it's really easy to get into a job and you're there for years and you don't maintain your certifications. You
Right.
don't continue to network. You don't continue education. You don't continue to challenge yourself and stay up with whatever trade you're in. Well, something bad happens and you're out looking for a job. You're not really as valuable or as employable as you were when you started the job that you were in. And so become and always be what I describe as eminently employable. Right?
Yeah.
Continue to network even if you're in a job. Continue to learn. Continue to train. Continue to pursue outside certifications, and you're super comfortable, right? You're almost in your employer's head, right?
Right.
Like they know that you could probably go somewhere else, and it wouldn't be a lateral move, right? So they need to take care of you and
Sure.
motivate you.
Yeah, Goggins says that, when you have a job interview, usually you set your clothes out the night before.
Oh, yeah.
Your breakfast is made.
Yeah.
You're on time. You're early.
Yeah.
And then 6 months go by. You haven't set your clothes out. Your breakfast isn't made.
Oh, yeah.
You're showing up late.
Exactly.
You gotta
And
treat
like, and
everything.
that's a shout out to the military guys, right? The veterans looking, making that transition. I interview a lot of people, right? I look at hundreds of resumes, and military guys always stand out to me, right? Because military training comes with military bearing, right? And some of the things you're describing, right? They're going to be on time. They're
Yeah.
going to take the job serious. They are going to be dependable. They're going to be trainable, and they're going to jump right into it, right? I will never forget my first job out of the military. True story. Within 2 weeks, I'm always on time and I'm staying late, right? And true story, my boss came to me, the guy that hired me, within 2 or 3 weeks of being at the company, and he said, Falcon, man, like, you need to dial it back a little bit. Like, we don't want you setting a precedent here. And I thought, is this how the civilian world works? Like,
Yeah, a
man,
little bit.
I'm here to get it done, right? I want to be
Right.
here early. I want to stay late. I want to crush this week, this month, this year. And it's almost insulting. No, I'm not going to dial it back. This is what I do,
Yeah.
right? And then you fast forward, and I'm in his job, right? And within a
yeah.
year or so. And so you have to stay engaged and get after it, right? Day to day, stay eminently employable, continue to network, continue to train, continue to learn, and never get bored.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I always try to mirror my guests a little bit, so I got the hustle shirt.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
This is a little clothing brand that me and my buddies put together.
Very
It's
cool.
got the GYST at the bottom. That's
Okay,
Get your stuff together.
Get it.
We say it different. We say get your shit together.
Okay. I've got a.
Because
I have
of-
to send you a picture. I have a sign in my office that says "Get shit done."
Yeah.
And all of my. It's a blank sign.
It's like a canvas.
Yeah. Somebody sent it to me years ago, and it's hanging in my corporate office today and my home office, and people they always notice it. But
Right.
Yeah.
Do you still have the 1990s Jordan poster?
I do, and my wife hates it. So I still have a few things from my childhood. I still have multiple Michael Jordan posters. I still have a few mounts, think deer heads. She would never let any of this stuff go in the house, so I still have it all. It's up in the attic, and one day those Jordan posters are going to be worth millions. I'm just banking on it.
Because I think you probably had to scale back the man cave because now you've got 4 kids.
I
Four.
do. I have 4 young kids at home. My wife is a saint. She handles most of that. I'm a workaholic. I travel a lot still. But yeah, I've got 2 boys and 2 girls, twin girls, and
Yeah.
my house is a bit of a circus. It's pretty crazy.
I think you even passed on some of your intelligence to your son.
Yeah.
From what it seems like.
Yeah. He's an up and comer, and I promise I'm not hard on my son. Everyone's like, man, I bet, he has him doing push-ups and all this stuff. Not the case.
No, I see him having fun all the
Yeah,
time.
he loves it, man. He matter of fact, just this morning before we headed down to Beaumont, right, I was in his room watching him play Fortnite. So he's he just tries to be the best at super competitive.
My
Yeah.
son just recently got into gaming,
Yeah.
and I was just a little bit of a gamer
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
but I totally got out of it. I
Yeah.
don't have the time or the
Man,
patience. even.
shockingly enough, I still play. I will
love
still
it.
get on my Xbox. We've got a bunch of buddies, like former White House guys, that will play.
Oh, yeah.
So we're pretty competitive. So I still play whenever I can find a free hour on a weekend night. Yeah, I'll go
That's
in there.
fun with friends, though, I think.
Oh yeah, you get like, well, it depends, right? Like these guys they're like, really serious. These are, military guys that
Yeah.
have done all the stuff that you see in the video games
Like
in
the
real
Call of-
life.
Call of Duty.
Yeah. So you get on a headset with these guys, and they're calling out bearings and coordinating strikes, and
That's amazing.
we win a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm always the worst person on the team, but it's a good
Oh,
time. Yeah.
Did you ever get to spend much time around Navy SEALs when you were?
I did. A really interesting story. I used to go when I was at the White House. I did with President Bush and President Obama. Every year, either Thanksgiving or Christmas, we would go to a war zone, right, and have dinner with the troops,
Yeah.
right, turkey with the troops or Christmas with the troops.
Right.
And one thing that sticks out in my head, I was in Afghanistan one time, and look, I'm a Navy submariner, right? I'm an intelligence guy, signals intelligence, cyber warfare. So I'm kind of the keyboard warrior type, not like the Navy SEAL warrior type.
Right.
And so I flew into Afghanistan with the president, And, I'm in a suit, right? I'm completely out of my element. Like, I don't wear helmets and flak vest and carry grenades. That's just not what I'm not trained in. It's not what I do. So I get off this helicopter, and all these, Army guys run up, and, they're putting the helmet on me and all this, and then, protecting me, right, to get me to whatever base we were going to. And so I get in the Suburban. To give you an example, I get in the Suburban, and there's two guys, there's a driver and a passenger. I'm in the Suburban by myself, and they're required to give you like a safety briefing, right?
I figured you have a Humvee by
yeah,
now.
So it's a fully armored Suburban, right?
Okay.
So this driver was like, all right, Falcon, my name is so and so, right? This is a category, well, I don't know, 5 vehicle. It can withstand all this stuff, right, for so many minutes. And he starts listing all of his weapons he has on him, and like flashbangs and grenades. And the passenger, he has this, and he goes through all of his listing. He's like, so if we're incapacitated, this vehicle on its side, you know how to respond. And I was like, look, guys, let's stop the safety briefing now and be clear. Like, if this vehicle gets flipped over, like, I'm not popping up out of the top like Rambo with a bazooka, right? Like, how do I just call for help, right? These guys are serious. And so I make it to the base, and one more like life lesson if you ever find yourself in Afghanistan. Again, I'm in a suit, and some guys were setting up communications gear on the top of this compound. And I got called up there for whatever reason. Take a look at the setup or sign something off, right? Not thinking whatsoever. Like, I'm not a war zone guy. So
Right.
I just walk out, climb up the ladder, and get up on the roof and kind of looking at him. Hey, well, a Navy SEAL comes up, and he was like, and I'm in a suit. And just
geez.
total, just situational awareness. This SEAL's like, sir, what are you doing? And I just said, well, I don't know. They told me to come up and take a look at this thing. And he's like, look around you. And so, I kind of pan around, and we're in this valley and surrounded by like mountains.
Oh, geez.
And he's like, look, like, you are what we would describe as an HVT, a high value target.
Yeah.
And so there's guys all around that would love nothing more than to like take you out right now. Like, please get off the roof in a suit.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa, wake up call. So I go down, and the very next day they're doing like their intros, right? And you ask about Navy SEALs, all these guys are lined up on the wall, right? There's like 10 or 15 of them, just incredible folks, right? Warriors. And so they start introducing themselves, right? So we know who they are. This side is like Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, Marine Sniper, Navy SEAL, Navy SEAL, Navy SEAL, Air Force Combat Controller, Coast Guard Communicator. It's all special warfare, just legendary guys.
Yeah.
And so that was my interaction with the SEALs. And I made an Air Force joke at this, and I learned another hard lesson. It gets down to the end, and this guy's like, oh, yeah, well, I'm Air Force. Well, I kind of thought I was being funny and cracked a joke. I said, Air Force? I didn't even know Air Force had special operations. Right? And instantly, these other SEALs, right, like these other operators take up for him. They're like, whoa, Falcon, like that guy right there is the baddest, probably craziest person on this compound.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's he do? Well, it's an Air Force combat controller. He is the guy that crawls solo behind enemy lines and paints targets for planes to hit by himself. And he directs traffic. Like, he's
like a ninja.
He is a ninja,
Yeah.
and he's half crazy. Like, that guy there is probably the baddest operator in this room.
Yeah, because you came from the idea of what people joke about the Air Force is like they have the late wake up time and the easy PT.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, oh, it's raining, we're not going to do PT.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, intra-service jokes, right? Everyone, there's a lot of them, right? We all like to give each other crap, but we'll always protect each other if someone from the outside comes in. So you'll hear, the Navy guys will tell the Marines, hey, yeah, you guys are the Department of the Navy, right? And the Marines will say, yeah, we're the men's department, right? And then you'll hear Navy guys pick on the Coast Guard, right? No, they're the puddle guys, right? Or the Coast Girls. And then Air Force is the chair force. And everyone just picks on each other. But, God forbid someone from outside that circle picks on any of them, right? It's like instant wall protection.
It is. I mean, because at that time, I think when you're in that deployment situation, you're all brothers for sure.
Exactly.
So here's my last question.
What you got?
So you get the phone rings, you get the call from the Secretary of Defense, and he says, Falcon, I want you to be the new director of the Space Force. What do you say?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
The Space Force,
yeah.
for what it's intended to do, is basically what you were into. It's computers and satellite defense. It's not laser beams and space warfare. It's protecting our assets.
Yeah, I would want to know, right? I'm an analytical, data-driven guy, right? I want to know the roles and responsibilities, what the expectations are, what I need to be, what I need to deliver to be successful in the first 90 days. Tell me a little bit about the job and what the mission is, right? I have to be passionate about the mission and the objective, and then introspectively I have to be comfortable that I can deliver on that, right? I want to sign up for something that I'm really not qualified to do. And so that's right, the Space Force, it's about communications, data, infrastructure, technology, and cyber all day long, right? But if it's about doing spacey things, I'm the most unqualified guy in North America when it comes to space. So.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to leave the people of?
That's it, man. I'm, happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Really cool thing you've got going on here with the podcast here in the local community and spreading the word. Appreciate you being flexible on schedule.
Oh yeah.
One thing I learned coming in here, Beaumont has grown like crazy, and you don't want to be making it across Beaumont at 5 o'clock. Beaumont has
that's right.
ridiculous rush hour traffic.
I think Lumberton's last population was 2010, and it was at like 11,000. We're pretty confident that it almost doubled.
That's
and
insane.
we're not going to know until 2020, and a lot of that's even outside the city limits too.
That's insane. So
you wouldn't even recognize Lumberton.
It's just I mean, well, the folks I guess listen to this and or watching it later on, I was supposed to meet Tyler here I think at 5 o'clock or so, and I was about 20 minutes early, so I thought to myself, hey, I'm just going to swing in Starbucks real quick. I ended up being 20 minutes late.
Was it the Starbucks by Kroger?
I have no idea. It was the one when I was first coming into Beaumont.
Oh, okay.
Like right off the freeway.
Oh, maybe College Street-ish area. Yeah.
It was absolute insane. I never expected the amount of traffic and the Starbucks crush at 5 o'clock. But appreciate you being flexible, and really cool thing you got going on. And
yeah, man, you're welcome back anytime. We want to hear about your adventures. So
and if anybody wants to reach out, right, the best place to hit me up, I guess, would be on LinkedIn, right? Send me a LinkedIn invite, and a pro tip on LinkedIn. Spend the 30 seconds and put a few sentences in there about who you are, how we met, how you heard, and what you want to do.
Right.
We get a lot of LinkedIn requests that just say, let's be friends, like the generic one, and those are instant kind of decline for most people. So spend the time, put in a little note, let me know you heard the podcast and what you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I think if you add a note on Cody's LinkedIn request that says, I heard you on the Tyler Knows Everything podcast, it's an instant accept. It's smash that like button.
That's right. Send it in. That's right. Cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
All right, great stuff, Cody. Man, I'm exhausted after that episode. Hey, don't forget to visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Tyler Knows Everything and become a patron. That's www.patreon.com/Tyler Knows Everything. There's many different levels that you can help us out with, starting as little as $5. That's going to help us expand projects and do some cool live events that we have coming up. Go check out the Patreon video on YouTube and on the Patreon page to talk about all the cool things that we have in the works. I'll see you next time. I'm Tyler, your host of the Tyler Knows Everything podcast, where the nose is crossed out because I always want to learn more. Have a good rest of your week.